Okay, we can get started. Welcome to the March 11th, 2024 meeting of the Town of Niskuna Planning Board and Zoning Commission. Ms. Bergami, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Laflamme?
Here.
Ms. Strang?
Here.
Mr. Khan?
Here.
Ms. Blavsky? Here. Mr. Darpino?
Here.
Ms. Gold?
Present.
Chairman Walsh?
Here. Okay, we have the approval of the minutes from the February 26, 2024 meeting in our packet. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Ms. Strang to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
A second.
Second by Ms. Bilovsky. Any comments or corrections to the minutes? I have none. Anybody? No? Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes from the February 26, 2024 meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or recusals or abstentions?
I will abstain.
Okay, one abstention from Mr. D'Arpino, and the minutes from February 26th are approved. All right, we have no public hearings tonight, so we'll move right to privilege of the floor. Anyone wishing to be heard regarding any planning and zoning matters, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and we'll listen to what you have to say. Privilege of the floor is open. Anybody in the audience? Privilege of the floor? Okay, Laura, do we have anybody online tonight?
We have no one online and no emailed comment.
No communications. Okay, I'll be quick then. Hearing or seeing no one, and we'll close privilege of the floor. No unfinished business. We'll move right to new business. And under new business, we have one resolution tonight, and that's Resolution 2024-09, a resolution for site plan approval for construction of a new DAC building for GE Vernova at 2690 Balltown Road, contingent on a 19-foot height variance. I'll summarize part of the resolution and this part. Resolved, this planning board has determined this project will not have a significant effect on the environment and hereby directs the town planner to file a negative declaration. And be it resolved, the planning board and zoning commission has determined that the required parking is excessive due to the unique nature of the research and development at the site, and is allowing the landowner to bank 22% of the required parking, that's 94 spaces, with the following conditions. One, should the applicant decide to construct the bank parking in the future, an additional site plan review will be required from the planning board to ensure adequate stormwater, lighting, and landscape screening is included with the construction of the bank parking spaces. And be it further resolved that this planning board and zoning commission finds that the site plan application referenced above meets the requirements of the zoning code, contingent upon a height variance from the zoning board of appeals, and hereby approves the site plan with the following conditions. One, final site plan approval is contingent upon the granting of a height variance for the proposed building by the zoning board of appeals. Should such a variance be denied, the applicant will be required to return to the planning board for continued site plan review. Two, final landscaping and tree planting plans shall be reviewed and approved by the Niskuna Tree Council. Three, prior to site disturbance, the applicant shall participate in a pre-construction meeting with the town of Niskuna and shall address any concerns raised by the town or the town designated engineer. And the next one is a one. We'll have to strike that little one there. Just copy and paste error there. Prior to the pre-construction meeting, A, any engineering and drainage concerns will be addressed to the satisfaction of the town superintendent of water, sewer, and engineering. B, any questions or concerns raised by the town designated engineer will be addressed by the applicant in a formal letter to the town. And C, any minor changes to the final site plans will be addressed to the satisfaction of the town planning department. Condition number 4, prior to the site disturbance, the plan shall be modified to reflect agreed upon decisions of the pre-construction meeting, if any, and distributed as required to the town. Final site plan shall be submitted to the town labeled for construction. 5, in accordance with Chapter 180, the Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Ordinance of the Town of Niskuna, the applicant shall put in place soil erosion and sediment control measures sufficient to stabilize disturbed areas. These measures shall be satisfactory to the superintendent of water, sewer, and engineering and shall remain in place until such time as natural vegetation has been successfully established. Mr. D'Arpino, do I have a motion for the resolution?
So moved.
Resolution is moved for adoption by Mr. D'Arpino. Do I have a second?
Second.
And we just,
Chairman Walsh, I'll be recusing myself.
yep, Mr. Khan be recusing himself. So, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Khan. All right. So we have moved and seconded, and we'll have some discussion. Let's have the applicant come forward, okay? Or a representative of the applicant. Just on the last page, page 4, that's just a typo. Under number 3 on the pre-construction meeting, those things should just be listed. So that number 1, we could just strike that, and we'll see if we have any other changes to the resolution. All right.
Hi, good evening. For the record, again, my name is Charles Dumas. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Lemery Chrysler, and we represent GE Vernova. I have with me this evening Peter Lilholt from CT Mail, who's the civil engineer on the project. I think the resolution is a fine resolution. I did have a couple of things that I'd like to socialize with the board. One is with respect to the bank parking. The draft resolution provided for a bond. And I'm just hoping that that can be waived. It doesn't seem to me that it would be necessary in this context because the site plan approval is in and of itself the permission to do something. And if it becomes known to code enforcement that the additional parking is required because of the usage of the property, well, then code enforcement would notify the applicant that it needs to come back to this board for determination of things like drainage and dealing with the impervious surface and so forth. And the failure to do so, of course, there would be the notice of violation that the code enforcement would have. So I'm thinking that, in and of itself, for this particular project, that bond requirement really isn't necessary. So I would ask that the board consider waiving that.
That's on page 2. It's
Yeah,
the second,
it's in a whereas.
yeah, it's a
provision.
second paragraph from the bottom. I just want to point that out to
Yes,
everybody.
that's correct. I'm
Yep,
sorry.
and I will read that. The planning board may allow up to 25% of required parking to be unpaved under bond to allow extra landscaped area. So the question is whether or not the words under bond should remain there or need to remain there for any legal reason. Is our ordinance actually state under bond in it?
Yeah, our code is written like that, but I can tell you that we've never collected a bond in all of the waiving of the parking that the planning board has done.
We have
Um,
in the past.
Not in
I've
the,
been at meetings where the town board released the bond.
really, not in the last like 15 years. I've looked. It may have been a long ago practice. I am very comfortable with the board waiving the bond because we would use the site plan approval for enforcement. We would never use a bond for enforcement.
Yeah, in my experience, bonding oftentimes is required, for example, in a residential subdivision, where because of, time of the year, it's not possible to complete certain things, or lots of times the baby top isn't applied to the road surface until, the final CO for the final house. So lots of times, in my experience, I'll see bonding in those circumstances, but we really don't have that situation here.
Right, and like you said, there's two things. Either code enforcement would say there's a problem over there, or hopefully General Electric would say, hey, there's not enough parking for my employees and visitors, so I'm going to come back to the board to increase the parking, which is a requirement.
It's no benefit to the company whatsoever
If they can't
to
park.
have a problem
I
for
understand.
their employees or other users
Yeah.
of the property.
Does anybody on the board have any concern with striking the words under bond?
A bit.
Especially in this case where the bonding is reflected in a whereas clause instead of in the resolve clause. I think it could go either way, but if it makes the applicant happier, no problem.
Yeah, as long as the
No.
board's okay with it, and then we can do that. All right, so let's see whatever changes we may have and continue the discussion.
Right. The other principal thing I wanted to talk about was the reference in the whereas clause, and you adequately addressed the fact, Rob, that it appears in the whereas and not in the resolution. But I'm just trying to, for clarity, make sure that we have a site plan that is not only enforceable but fully understandable by everybody that has to comply with
And
it.
this is exactly the right time to raise any issues that you have before we vote on it.
Right. It's in the third whereas clause on page 2. There's reference to the Architectural Review Board for review of the colored elevation and review and view images. And I'd like to have reference to that stricken for the purpose that I don't know what real input the Architectural Review Board would have. The building, as we've established in prior presentations, simply is not going to be visible either from the bike path, Balltown Road, River Road, or any of the other residences. The visual imagery that we offered demonstrated that the existing high bay, 64-foot high bay building that currently exists at the Research and Learning Center is just barely visible from the bike path and not visible at all from the local roads. So the 54-foot building, by logic and reasoning, wouldn't be visible at all from the bike path or from surrounding properties. So I'm not really sure what the Architectural Review Board would add. I can say that there were a couple of issues that came up at the CAC that we addressed. One of the concerns was to offer enough opacity for the glass in the front of the building to discourage bird strikes, which our architect has assured that can be done. So I'm not sure what else the Architectural Review Board would offer. And frankly, at this point, we're racing to the goal line. We have the ZBA meeting next Wednesday on the 20th, and hopefully, contemporaneous with the passage of the next week or 10 days, things will be worked out with the TDE. We can talk about that in a minute, such that the pre-construction meeting can occur pretty quickly after the ZBA's anticipated approval.
Okay.
So to summarize, if we could eliminate reference to the Architectural Review Board, I would appreciate it.
Okay. Is there anything else that you had regarding the resolution?
One other thing, just for clarity, and it's not a big deal, CT Mail has demonstrated in its revision to the site plan, or its supplement to the site plan, that 94 additional parking spaces, bank parking spaces, can be accommodated, but there's really only a requirement for 91.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I noticed the discrepancy there, but I thought that since it was more in your favor, and it's a 22%, we have a flexibility up to 25. I didn't see harm. And
I see no harm at all, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood, and for the
Yep.
record, there was only a need for 91 additional spaces for the building.
Okay. Just wanted to ask the board what they feel about the striking the whereas for the Niskayuna Architectural Review Board. Get some input from the board on that. Thoughts?
Well, I'd like to see it remain in there for a few reasons. One, it's a non-binding committee that's there. They review things. It doesn't hold up the time frame. They can review the project at any point. And I thought that since the establishment of that board, it's been actually pretty helpful. Sometimes there's a couple small recommendations that come out of that are helpful to the overall project in the end.
Mr. Dumas, do you have any reservations, candidly, about what the Architectural Review Board might?
I was just concerned about another step. We have been here 3 times, CAC twice. We're going to go to the zoning board. I'm just not sure exactly what that would do to the timeline of the project, or exactly what value could be added at this stage. But I understand, Dave, your concern. I respect that, but I'm just not certain exactly what the import of all of that is.
Well, let me
I'm just trying to dialogue that with
let
you.
me ask Mr. Henry's online, who kind of leads the agendas and scheduling of the Architectural Review Board. Clark, when is the next meeting of the Architectural Review Board? It's monthly, right?
Yes, it's the third Wednesday of each month. And I agree with David that that's a step, but it's not a pacing step to anything, because all they offer are suggestions. It's not a requirement, so to speak. So although it's another small step, it doesn't hold anything up.
Which would you say, is it next Wednesday that they're meeting again?
Yes,
Yeah, that's my appearance at the zoning
Right,
board.
that's during, what time is that meeting?
It's in the morning.
yes, it's 8:30 in the morning.
And that's
The
virtual
video
meeting?
conference at 8:30 a.m.
And it's a Zoom, it's a Google Meet, right, meeting?
Yes, correct.
So it sounds to me that if Clark, could you get you on the agenda for next Wednesday? It's in the morning, so it won't conflict with the ZBA. Your engineer would sit in on that. I think you could meet the requirement pretty quickly without having any impact. How's that sound?
I would prefer the
Yeah.
alternative, but I understand the
Yeah.
board's interest in leaving that in.
Okay. And I think,
Process.
yeah, and I don't think it'll hurt you at all. So I think you'll be in good shape. All right. So obviously another meeting, but yeah, we'll get through it. Probably not a big agenda. There's not a lot of projects right now in front of the Architectural Review Board. So I'm sure Clark will take care of you and move that along. Okay. Does that sound good with the board? So we'll just leave that. Okay. All right. All right. So we're all set, at least as far as your concerns with the resolution. We'll leave Architectural Review Board. We'll most likely strike under bond. And then if we're going to do that, I'd also like to just strike on page 4 that extra number 1, is make it formal if we're going to do all that. But before we move ahead, let's have maybe your engineer. We did receive a letter from Prime Engineering, the first round of comments. I know we have the condition that allows those comments to be resolved before the pre-construction meeting and before the project goes forward, but I'd like to at least hear whether you reviewed the letter and whether you have any concerns or any showstoppers there.
Good evening, Peter Lilholt from CT Mail Associates. I'm the engineer of record, the division manager for civil engineering and land services. So we are in receipt of actually 2 letters from your town designated engineer, one dated March 6th, which was in your packet, and another dated March 8th, which was just issued on Friday afternoon. The letters are almost identical, and the reason for the issuance of the second letter is Prime AE inadvertently reviewed a superseded set of plans that were submitted initially as part of our application. And going back and re-reviewing our more recent plan set, which is in your packet, dated February 6th, many of the comments had been addressed in the more recent plan set. I can tell you, I've read the review letter. We've actually begun addressing the comments. I had a draft of the response letter before me now, and we have no issue addressing all of the comments. In fact, quite a few of the comments have been addressed by virtue of the numerous meetings we've been before the planning board, the CAC, the tree council, etc. And some of the comments would have been addressed had the TD had an opportunity to see all the supplemental materials which have been provided by virtue of our applications and meetings. But no issues addressing those comments. If you'd like, I can highlight some of them, but we take no exception with the review comments and feel like they can be addressed. In fact, there's not that many revisions to the plan, certainly none that would change the site layout, grading, drainage, lighting. In addition, not in the TD review letter, but I have been working very closely, of course, receiving comments from the CAC, and our landscape architect has been addressing those comments with regard to the landscape plan and the tree council, coordinating just today with Laura on some incorporating those comments or the intent of those comments to the best of our ability, which includes planting an additional 19 trees that are not currently depicted on the landscape plan. That's a 1-for-1 replacement of trees to be removed in the tree clearing limit for trees over 10 inches in diameter. So I can confidently say we feel like we can easily address these comments and have no concerns.
Yeah, I don't recall, I'm looking right now, the March 8th letter, seeing that one, but on the March 6th letter, so this may be a moot point, but on March 6th, I think one of the things I picked up on was the finished floor elevations for the average grade in order to calculate the actual height variance required. Was that provided on the February update?
It is.
Are you confident in the 19-foot height variance being adequate?
Yes. Thank you.
Mercy.
Obviously, it's lower and better, but but a maximum of 19. There was questions about the ADA compliance with the parking spots. Was that resolved and everything?
As you know, we are not proposing any new parking. What we did do was add one new handicap parking stall. So this is existing parking here. Now, the plan that Laura is sharing, this is a demonstration of how we could provide the 91 additional parking spaces. So this is not what we're proposing to build. But this spot right here was new impervious area. We're proposing to add 1 handicap space. As you'll recall, we have 10 to 12 employees in the building. So the 1 handicap space meets the code. I think what the town designated engineer was referring to is if 91 spaces were proposed, you need 4 handicap spaces. So we are not proposing 4 handicap spaces because we're not proposing any parking. Nonetheless, we wanted to accommodate handicap parking for the new employees and visitors. If we were to construct the full 91 spaces, then we would probably convert some of these existing spaces to handicap and add a stall because of its proximity to the front of the proposed building. But we're not proposing to do that here and now. So that's how I intend to respond to that comment.
Okay. Just a couple that I've kind of picked up on that, we usually discuss in lighting. I don't know if that was addressed in the subsequent plans. Is there any additional lighting and has that been provided?
The lighting plan was not included in the earlier set. It was included in the February 6th set. We don't have that much lighting because we're not proposing parking. We have some attractive ornamental lighting, and it looks like Laura's looking for it. At the front of the building, we have lighted bollards, some attractive lighting at the entranceway, and then some lighting above some of the man doors, exit doors, and things like that, building mounted lighting. There is no pole lighting.
Okay.
And the response on the March 8th letter on lighting from your TD says details for lighting plan were provided on sheet C105, identifying the locations of the proposed building, mounting height, quantity, lighting model, and lumens. Sheet 507, figure 6 provides details on light bollard. The plan also provides a photometry of the proposed lighting and location of the site, showing that lighting would not be visible beyond the proposed project site. No further comments. That's the TDE's follow-up response in his March 8th letter.
Okay. Just kind of look through here, see if there's anything else I had. I had it marked up copy. Apparently I didn't save it. There were some stormwater questions and so on and so forth, some details, filtration, so on and so forth, in the March 6th letter.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I know those details will be worked out, because we need a town designate engineer to sign off to say that you've at least discussed any open items and come to agreement. So I know that's going to have to occur prior to the pre-construction meeting, or anything that comes up at the pre-construction meeting will have to be resolved.
Agreed.
Okay.
There were quite a few comments on the SWIP, which we're working through. Don't see any concerns with those. Not in the March 6th letter, but the March 8th letter from the TDE, there were 4 additional SWIP comments. One of which was requesting a letter from the State Historic Preservation Office. We're reviewing that now to see if that's necessary to have a consultation with them. The proposed project is outside the crisp buffer areas. However, our stockpile area is just within the buffer. But so we'll work with them and determine whether or not that consultation is absolutely necessary. Item 13 of the SWIP review comments.
Okay. Any thoughts from the boards or any questions for the applicant or engineer of the applicant? No? All right, then I'm going to make a motion that we modify the resolution, strike the words on page 2, that'd be the second paragraph from the bottom, strike under bond.
Excuse me, Chairman Walsh.
Yes.
I know I'm recused, but my matter is more of a text editing one.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, that whereas quotes the quote. The
Yeah,
quote.
so where is the end quote in that? So we have a beginning quote that starts if.
Yeah, actually, I think it's missing its second quote, but it's actually the end is the 3 years. The bond shall be, that's the end of the quote right there.
Thank you. I didn't see that.
Okay, so does this work if if we put the end quote after unpaved and then take out under bond, and then the part of it is just summarizing the rest of the statute to allow extra landscape area. So that then what we've cited is actually part of 220-19E.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll put the,
make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I might be able to do it. Let's see if I can edit the piece.
so we'll put the quote under left unpaved to close it. Is that,
Yeah.
is that what I heard? And still strike under bond. Okay. All right.
Like that.
Oh, yeah. Obviously you have to strike that. The bond shall be retained for 3 years.
It's probably hard for you guys to see this.
Okay, so we struck under bond and the bond shall be retained for 3 years and close the quotes. Okay. All right, and then the other, since we're doing some cleanups on the last page, page 4, under number 3, condition number 3, we have just a typo, the number 1 there. All those A, B, and C basically fall underneath the pre-construction meeting under condition number 3. So we'll just strike that number 1 there. Okay. So that's my motion that we modify the resolution as we just discussed regarding the bonding and page 4, striking that number 1. Do I have a second? A second on that motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Diapino. All those in favor of modifying the resolution as we just discussed, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we know we have one recusal, Mr. Khan, of course. Okay, so we have a modified resolution. All right. Any discussion on the resolution as modified? Guess we have to move the modified resolution, right, Mr. Hess? We have to move it again. So, Mr. Diapino, would you like to move the modified resolution?
Move to vote on the new modified resolution.
Okay, move for adoption by Mr. Diapino. And we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bilofsky. Okay, so we have a new resolution to vote on. Is there any discussion, any further discussion from the applicant at all?
No.
No? Okay. How about the board? Anything else? All right, we're all happy? All right. All right, Miss, I'm losing it today. Bergami, please call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Laflamme,
Aye.
Ms. Strain,
Aye.
Mr. Khan, oh, sorry, excuse me. Ms. Bilofsky,
Aye.
Mr. Darpino,
Aye.
Ms. Gold,
Aye, it's totally consistent with the zoning and has the benefit of not adding much traffic at all.
Chairman Walsh.
Aye, resolution's approved. Good luck at the Zoning Board of Appeals. Clark will move you through the Architectural Review Board, which I think is worthy, and, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
See you soon.
Okay.
Right.
All right. All right, thank you, everybody, for working through that. And that's it for new business. So we have a few different discussion items tonight. First discussion item being 2475 Brookshire Drive. This is the Tall Oaks Apartment, an application for site plan review for a monument, or actually a directory sign. We did just kick this off a couple of meetings ago, and I think the feedback from the board was, well, I don't think we had a problem with the directory sign. Sounded like there was a need, and we were okay with that. Well, we just challenged the location. Is there somebody online that wanted to discuss that?
Yes, I'm Tom Wheeler with AJ Signs.
Hello, Mr. Wheeler.
How are you?
Good.
So I reached back out to our client and talked to them about it. We submitted their response to the board. Hopefully you've all seen that. Basically, the parking lot that they want to put this in is disconnected from the rest of the complex. And the complaint they've had is people basically get stuck in this parking lot and they can't figure out how to get to the rest of the complex. So we want to put a sign there so they can look at the map and see that there is, in fact, a whole complex behind them. They can go out and go in one of the other entrances and get to the rest of the apartment complex. So it's really to help them with a problem they're having in terms of wayfinding.
Okay, and there was a couple of alternatives that were provided on the, I'm trying to scroll to that right now. And maybe Laura can pull that up also.
Yeah, so Tom, maybe you could just talk about, they want the sign kind of close to where they had proposed it in the median, but at the last meeting, the board had concerns that if you put it right in the middle of the grass and then there were cars parked on either side, it would be pretty inaccessible for people to walk up to and see it. And in the drawing that I have up on the screen, it looks like there's a proposal to either move it to the end of the grass median so that theoretically it would be accessible for people to walk up to then, and or put it on the other side where there's like a fire lane and people could also drive up and look at it.
Yeah, the thought was the one by the fire lane. You have the sidewalk there, and it's a fire lane, so there should be nobody parked there. You could pull up, look at the map, and then leave and not block the fire lane. Or you could walk up to it on the sidewalk and look at the map, and then go on your way. The fire lane, the one by the fire lane is probably the best option just because it's going to be the most accessible. And theoretically, unless there's a fire, there shouldn't be anybody in the fire lane. So that would leave this to something that people could pull up to look at and leave.
Yeah, that was my thought, Mr. Wheeler, is that, it's nice there because you don't have to get out of the car. The other location, there's, you can see there's 2 cars parked there now.
Yep.
So it might be difficult to even see depending on how good your eyesight is. And I thought that the other location, they say, there's a sign, just pull up to it, maybe put their window down and see what's going on and be on their way without having to exit the car, was my thoughts.
I feel
Yep,
like
I
it's
agree.
also kind of natural because the sidewalk is coming down to the parking lot here. So it's a place that your eye is going to look anyway.
Yep. And obviously the applicant's okay with that location if the board feels that's the best spot,
Yes.
right?
But it's better.
What does the board think?
Sounds good to me.
Better place.
Sounds like we're getting a lot of positive feedback there. And again, the sign was, it's in the packet again, and it's basically a directory sign that shows the, I gotta zoom in, I can't see it. Yeah, it kind of shows where the parking lots are and, just the roads to be able to navigate around the site. Right?
So just for clarity, you said the purpose here was because of the disconnected nature of this parking lot. So
Correct.
the other parking lot in the back is somewhat disconnected too, right? You have to actually come out onto Brookshire or Route 7 to actually access the Pierce Road entrance. So is there another sign being proposed for that parking lot too, or no?
No, they just want to do this one. This is the parking lot they're having trouble with. The other lots, there's the main sign on Route 7. There's a sign on the other road also. People don't seem to have trouble with that.
Okay.
Okay, well, I don't have a problem with it. Does anybody have any concerns? I mean, next thing is if are no concerns, we could just agree on that location, show that as a location and call for a resolution on the next meeting approving the sign.
Sounds good.
Is everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Tom, we'd just like you to submit, kind of based on this discussion, a final drawing with just the one location that was selected shown, and that would be what the board could act on.
Yep, I'll do it.
Sounds good? Okay.
Okay.
Are there any other comments regarding Brookshire Drive? No, we'll have a resolution next meeting. All right, next is discussion item number 2, 1 Glen Eddy Drive. That's Glen Eddy, an application for site plan approval for community garden enhancements, including a new shed. How you doing tonight?
Good evening. Nick Zeglin with Environmental Design Partnership and Mike Tierney with St. Peter's Health Partners is also here tonight. We're here on behalf of the applicant, Glen Eddy Senior Living Facility. Essentially, the residents of the Glen Eddy community have an existing community garden that's about 2,000 square feet. That's got some planter beds in it, and it's a little bit of rough shape. The planter beds are kind of dilapidated. Some of them are falling over. So they wanted to just do some enhancements to the garden. It would be relatively the same footprint, a little bit wider on 2 sides, about 500 square feet would be added. But essentially they want to replace the existing chain link fence and put in a nice 4-foot white vinyl fence, as well as a 10-foot by 12-foot shed to store some of their hand tools and equipment in. And that facade would match the facade of the existing Glen Eddy buildings. So it would blend in nicely. And then also 12 planter beds within the fenced area. The residents came up with a great design that they think is going to stand the test of time a little better than these ones. So that's essentially the gist of the project. Happy to answer any questions you have tonight. Thank you.
No, thank you. And there's the pictorial of the fence and the shed.
Yep.
I took a look, obviously looking at the agenda packet, I didn't see any concerns again for myself. Seemed to be pretty straightforward and at a location that doesn't bother anything. And it's at the current location, just a slight increase of the square footage and the addition of a shed, which seems like it'd be helpful. So I didn't really have any concerns. Thoughts from the board?
So this will be visible from the street, right?
It's not super visible. He has the visibility. This looks like the most visible.
Yes, there's a slight break in the trees when you're driving on Console
Mhm.
Road where you can see it for a split second. But for the most part, it's shaded or buffered pretty well by trees along Console Road. Yeah, there you can see it.
Oops.
Yeah, I mean, it's far enough off the road, so, yeah, that's why I didn't think it would cause any harm personally. Okay. All right. All right, I guess if it's okay with the board then, straightforward enough, we'll have a resolution for approval the next meeting. Okay.
Great.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, we appreciate you coming in tonight.
Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and next is 412 Balltown Road, application for site plan approval. This is a tenant change for Papa John's Restaurant. Included in your packet. That was previously, I believe it was a GameStop. That was called Game something or other. Not that I've ever been there, but do we have an applicant on the line that wants to speak to this?
Yes, I'm here. Eric Bjornby, architect.
Okay. That's Eric.
Yes.
Okay, how you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I think, the board in general I think we kind of talked about this a little bit. Did we last time? Or maybe, no, it was at the other meeting, probably at economic development meeting. Basically, it's a tenant change and it's zoned appropriately for this use. The hours and information are included in the packet. I think the biggest question we have for the board is signage. We always review the signage, and this one does exceed the 1 foot per 1 linear foot of facade. And there was also a previous area variance granted for the signage. And let me see, and that brings the total available to this applicant to be 29.5 square feet. But the sign as proposed is 34.5. So it's an additional 4.8 square foot. And there's in the packet, and that's a good picture. And I like the picture on page, where is it? There's one that shows on the building, Laura. 125 kind of shows it on the building. Now I know that maybe Clark probably calculated the area, or maybe the applicant did. I think we draw like a rectangular box around a sign, and that's where it comes from, the area. And I believe in this case, if you look at the Papa John's, it's kind of like kind of increases the height, the way the letters are laid out. So that would tend to increase, the footprint of the sign itself. So I didn't really have much concern, but I figure we talk to the board about it and see what the thoughts are. Is this a standard size, the sign that's used at other locations?
Right. That's a standard size. This is from corporate. If the board has any issues with it, we would be happy to modify it to be under the required square footage. I believe it was 29.5 per the previous variance in 2005.
Yep.
So if like you said, the actual square footage is probably less, especially because it's channel lettered and it has the Papa John sign and then the Better Ingredients, Better Pizza. So, overall the actual square footage is significantly lower, but just because it gets squared off and everything like that, it's up to the board, but we're fine either way.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, if it's a standard sign, again, I'm okay with whatever the board would like. it sounds like you could bring it down slightly to comply with the previously granted waiver of 29.5. Again, it seems like it looks pretty good, so I didn't really have a concern, but again, it's one opinion. So let's ask the board, anybody have any concerns with the tenant change? Okay, and how about the sign as proposed, which would require a 4.8 square foot waiver? Actually, can we grant a waiver there? We can grant the waiver, right?
Chairman, do you have it, Laura?
Yeah.
Sorry, was that clerk?
Yeah, what, did you want to answer Chairman Walsh's question?
Oh, yeah, we can grant waivers in the shopping center commercial. We can't grant waivers for the next sign room.
Yeah, the next sign.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew I saw it somewhere. Okay. So what's everybody think? I mean, we could have a resolution, granting the tenant change. Sounds like everybody's okay with the tenant change. The only question is that will that resolution contain a waiver for the increased sign, or will we ask the applicant to meet the previously approved waiver of 29.5 square feet?
Yeah, so Chairman Walsh, from my perspective, I think I would like to ask the applicant to, not request a waiver for the sign.
I
And-
agree.
On board.
Okay,
That's not an issue.
all right. Well, it sounds like there'll be at least the majority of the board there, so.
Yeah.
If you got a problem, we have to downsize it and it comes out by our code, 30 instead of 29.5. Well, that's different, but let's try to get it as close to the 29.5 as possible. How's that sound?
It'll be custom at that point, so we can accommodate. Like I said, it was a standard size. So we just, figured we'd see what the board had to say about it. But if it needs to be custom, we can just meet the 29.5.
All right. Okay. Any other questions or comments for the applicant? Any concerns? All right. So again, we'll have a tentative resolution at the next meeting approving the tenant change and with the assumption that the sign meets the previously approved waiver. How's that?
Thank you, sir.
So this is going to another hearing?
No, we'll have a resolution. We have to have a resolution. So the resolution would be at the next meeting, which is April 8th. So you would
Okay.
get approval then and be able to get your building permit right after that meeting.
Okay.
All right.
You can submit all of your building permit materials and everything so that it can be ready to go if that
Okay.
meets your timeline.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Any questions, call the planning office, but as Laura stated, you can at least work in parallel so that when you get your approval that night, be ready to pull the string on the building permit, assuming that the code enforcement or building inspectors have an opportunity to look over the plans if they're submitted in a timely fashion.
Okay, understood.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and under discussion, 2546 Balltown Road, St. Peters, and this is a new application, site plan review, and this is new signage. It's also included in your packet, and this is the one where I think we cannot grant waivers, but we'd have to make, at least for the facade sign, right?
Right. So our code in the RP zoning district states that the planning board has to review all signage, but we don't have the capability of granting any waivers in this district. So we could do a recommendation to the zoning board, or
So they need a variance.
they need a variance.
All right. Now, for the sign that's on the, I guess, monument sign out front, is that one require anything?
No, I think that one's actually fine.
So that one's good, and that makes sense. I mean, even with the materials and everything, it's pretty much consistent with the sign that's already there, right?
Yeah, Clark, correct me if I'm wrong. I think they're just popping out a panel on that one.
Yeah.
Correct.
So is there somebody online? Is Mr. Wheeler, you're representing this applicant also?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. So in this case, and you could actually, and Laura, tell me if I'm wrong, they could, if that sign is compliant, it could actually go ahead. Well, I guess we still have to have a resolution, right? So we could have one resolution that approves that sign, independent of the zoning board of appeals recommendation.
Yes.
That would save time if you want it, if you need it, the time, right? Because the zoning board of appeals, it wouldn't make this meeting.
No, it would be the April.
So we'd have
meeting.
to make a recommendation at our April 8th meeting, and then it would be on the April zoning board of appeals meeting, right, Laura?
Right.
All right.
So just, both aesthetically and maybe a little bit practically, Mr. Wheeler, does the applicant really want that sign, the exterior wall sign?
Yeah, definitely.
Why? That's a very well-established practice. It's not like it's new. And
Yep.
my big concern with it is that's a very heavily trafficked area of Balltown Road. It's next to Craig School. You've got buses in and out and other things. A little bit further on the other side of the road, you've got the Schenectady JCC, which has a lot of traffic. And then just beyond that, next to Craig School, you've got soccer fields with a lot of traffic in and out. And I worry about the safety that the red and that facade sign up on the third floor is going to get people looking up in the air instead of at the traffic that's coming. And I think it would be really dangerous.
No, I got to disagree with you. I mean, the JCC has a digital sign in the same zone you're talking about, which would be much more distracting. That's a changing sign right on the road. You know, this is just to identify this building. People don't all know what's in there. Patients have trouble finding the practice. It is a very, very busy practice. St. Peter's just a couple of years ago took over this whole cardiology practice. There's multiple locations, and once they got their financials in order, they really wanted to brand these. These signs are a brand standard that St. Peter's has at over 200 locations in the capital region. So people recognize the brand. They know the brand. They know that's their doctor, that's their cardiologist, and we really just need to identify the building, identify the practice, so people can, in fact, find this. Definitely not distracting, not more distracting than anything else on that road. You know, Craig School has a red sign right by the road. Again, the JCC has a digital sign by the road. So this is way off the road. You're going to turn in, see it, identify the building, go to the doctor.
This sign is way up in the air. If people are looking up there, they're not looking at the traffic that's coming.
Well,
You've
they
got
should be looking at the
pedestrian
traffic.
there as well.
Chairman, I'm less concerned about people whizzing by at 45 miles an hour to seeing it, but more if we allow this sign for St. Peter's, is there anything precluding the other three occupants of the building for coming to us subsequently and asking for similar signs so that suddenly we have 4 illuminated
Yeah,
signs?
well, the one thing is we don't allow it. It would be an area variance by the zoning board of appeals. So this board would make a recommendation for this sign if the applicant chooses to go forward, and for any other signs that may go onto the building. But I'm kind of with you. More of my concern was aesthetically, just, how does it look on the building and whether it's required, since it's red on your monument sign out front. It seemed like that would attract enough attention to know that the cardiology associates are in this building, to me. But that's, again, just my opinion.
I agree. I think the monument sign is sufficient. I can't see I respect what you're saying there, but I think the monument sign should be sufficient.
Yeah, that panel's not very big.
Phil,
There's 2 entrances. Is it
there's one from Center Road.
right? So there's 2 entrances, but one off of Balltown.
Just one from Balltown.
So if you're coming in that direction, that building is the only destination. Correct? Okay.
Say that again.
I was just saying that I wasn't sure if there were 2 entrances off of Balltown Road, and it seems that we've confirmed it's one, and that building's the only destination for anyone heading in through the Balltown Road access. So I understand your point. I do agree. I think I've seen this higher up in other areas, but I also agree with the board of setting a precedence. Not a good idea in that monument sign. That's going to be that brand recognition that I would need to turn in.
Yeah.
How's this different than the Albany Med Building on Union Street that has multiple practices with extremely large monument sign and then multiple signs up high on the building? Again, bordering a residential area.
I mean, I thought the building only has the emergent care sign.
Yeah, I'll answer.
Yeah.
So it's different in part. Facts and circumstances here, we're talking about people driving by at 40 miles an hour plus. Volume of traffic on Balltown Road is notoriously high for the town of Niskayuna, but especially compared to Union Street, where traffic travels at a slower speed. And so this is not apples to apples. So I think it's fair for this board to have concerns about signs on the building, and the fact that there may be some different medical practice that has it in a different part of town is not a precedent that this board is bound to follow.
Well, again, we're making a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals. They're the agency that has the responsibility for the area variance. So one way to handle this is we could go forward, like I mentioned earlier, for a resolution approving the monument sign. And at the next meeting on April 8th, we could also make the recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, because you have the right to go there to see if you can get the area variance through them. But I think what you heard, Mr. Wheeler, is there's not a lot of support for it. So I can't guess what our recommendation would be until it comes to that point in time. And again, it's a recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, so they may not even take our recommendation. But that's a path forward.
Well, and Chairman, the only weird thing about that is that the RP signs also have to be approved by the planning board. So, I mean, I don't maybe fully understand the intricacies, but even if it got an approval from the zoning board, I think the code is actually quoted and it literally says all signs shall be approved by the planning board
Right.
for size, construction, and lighting. So I don't know which board would take precedence
We
on
can't
there.
grant the variance, but we can.
So you guys can
flummox.
you can approve up to 8 square feet of frontage sign,
Right.
and this one is obviously way bigger. And so then maybe if the zoning board wanted to then grant it to be 36 square feet, I think it still has to come back for planning board approval.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's kind of a weird
Well, that's what I
thing.
thought I was saying. I thought,
Yeah.
we'd have a resolution just for the sign that we can approve, the monument sign.
Right.
They're done. If they want to go and put the sign in and get a building permit, they can go forward on that path. And we'll also make a recommendation for the zoning board of appeals, because we have the right to ask for that if they want to go forward. If the zoning board of appeals does grant that sign, then it would have to
It
come
still
back
comes
to us
back to
again
us.
for a second resolution approving that sign.
If yeah.
If the area variance is
What if
granted,
we still didn't want to vote for approval?
we'd
No,
vote no.
Well,
Yeah.
the first step would be you would not recommend it to the.
Yeah,
zoning board.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yep. Which, everybody has their own opinion, so with our recommendation
I don't know.
would be ruled up.
I guess I could ask here, is there a compromise position?
Well, just looking at the sign, what if we'll call it the red trefoil logo and maybe backlit letters that say St. Peter's Health Partners? Would that be enough to identify the building
On the exterior wall
on
sign?
the exterior wall?
But not all of the building is part of St. Peter's.
Right.
The other practices are not.
Right, there's other practices in the building, so I don't think that's fair to them. We're just trying to let people know Cardiology Associates is in there.
It's a very well-established practice.
All right, so.
Well, I've recommended a path forward.
Laura, I have a little question. I'm a little confused. I understand the need for approval of a sign exceeding 8 square feet and for some of the other construction elements, but doesn't the code allow a facade sign up to 8 square feet? And can the planning board not allow that?
I mean, if the planning board has reasonable conditions tied to a specific site plan concern, they have the power to disapprove, essentially any site plan application that comes before them. But it have to be tied to something very specific. Data. Yeah. Right. So the applicant, it's just like the same as any application that comes before, the town. The applicant has certain rights under the code, and then the planning board reviews them under the code. It'd be pretty unusual for the planning board to just say you can have absolutely no facade sign. They're certainly allowed to have an 8 square foot facade sign, but the planning board could control
Right.
its location, size, color, that kind of thing.
But the 8 square foot on that building and at that location wouldn't be functional. They're proposing a 36 square foot sign.
Yeah, in this case, like an 8 square foot facade sign, it might make sense above the door, for wayfinding, kind of when you were parked at the parking lot,
Yeah.
or just to make you feel good about being in the area. But it's certainly not a 32 square foot sign on.
36, yep.
Does that make sense, Clark?
Sure.
So,
So I have no issue with the monument sign. That's no brainer to me.
Agreed.
sounds
But I
like,
have a huge issue with the facade sign.
okay,
that's
well, that would be
requested.
taken in our recommendation to the zoning board of appeals. Right?
Yeah, I mean, Tom, are you hearing the planning board? Do you want to pursue an appeal at the zoning board, or do you want to talk with your client?
I'll talk with them, because I mean, if it's gotta go, even if I got the variance, but it's gotta go back to planning, who's against it? I could save myself a couple nights and not do it.
Yep.
I
But
mean,
we
there's
can-
no point. So yeah, I mean, I definitely want the monument sign faces, and then I'll talk to my client and see what they want me to do. You know, if they want to compromise and go smaller and try that, or which route we want to go.
But obviously we'll need to know if you do want to go forward with the zoning board of appeals, because we need to make that recommendation at the April 8th meeting, because that's the only meeting prior to the April zoning board of appeals meeting, okay?
Yep, I'll get back to you this week.
All right, but we can still have the resolution approving the monument sign for the next meeting, so at least we can go forward in getting, the branding on that location.
Sounds good.
All right? Sound good with the board?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. We'll see what they have to say, okay?
Thank you, I appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it. All right, that closes all the discussion items for tonight. Under reports, we have the project we're all working on, and that's the timeline update for project submittals. I don't know, Clark, do you want to talk about that? I know you've done some work here.
I don't know, did you include, I don't really have any update on that, Laura. Did you have anything you wanted to throw out?
So what I put in the agenda statement is I put in Clark's benchmarking. So the 2 slides in there are the benchmarking that Clark reached out to Clifton Park, Glenville, Half Moon. I don't think we ever heard back from Bethlehem. We tried. With just so you guys can understand what their timelines were. And then my proposed next action was based on the discussions from the last meeting and the benchmarking that we've done, is that we'll put together we have a month, which is kind of nice, to put together a sample policy that the board could take a look at the next meeting.
All right, and Mr. DiRpiano, please put him down as project lead. He agreed several meetings ago to be the point on this. One thing of interest in the benchmarking is that I think that was our site plan was 10 days, I believe, Clark, submittal in advance. And if you take a look at some of these other municipalities, 17 days of lead time, 18 days. So we're still, Half Moon has 9 days, but I think it's
Well, they break it into simple and
simple.
complex. which is
Exactly.
interesting. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which we could do too, because we have a fair number of
Yeah,
simple
but-
applications.
But even under the agenda for Glenville, it's still 13 days. I assume that's the simple, right? It's still.
Yeah, for all.
Yeah, it's
I
still-
don't think they break out the.
Yeah.
What I'll do and get back to Dave with the information too, is I'll give them a call and find out, is that a drop dead date, as in you can't submit anything at all after that date? Or that's the one thing we didn't gather. This was gathered back in June of 23. So I'll ask them that question. Can you bring new information to the planning board meeting or not? So.
All right.
Yeah, I tend to be fairly lenient in when they can submit it. To me, it's when the planning office has to consider it and the board has to consider it. That's the issue. I mean, if they've got it right and they want to submit it, there's no harm done. And I don't mind stuff being sent on as it comes into the planning office. It's just that I want to be sure we all have enough time to digest it and really consider it before we start moving on it.
Right. Right. In the last meeting, we talked about, at least for resolutions or any type of action item, that we at least get it the Wednesday before, so we have opportunity to take a look at it in advance. That would just be a draft, and that the packet for the public would still go out on the web on a
Right.
Friday.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, even Wednesday's kind of cutting it close, but it's an improvement over where we're at now.
Yeah, so we would build the timelines, for instance, like if we still were sticking with the 10 days, we would build those timelines back from the Wednesday, not the Friday. Yeah.
Yep.
But I think Clark kind of brought up the one other thing, that it seemed like there was still a not really consensus, is whether or not we would allow information to be presented at the planning board if it didn't come in time to be in the packet.
Yeah, I think what I recall in the discussion, we thought that it'd be okay for the applicant to talk about it, say, hey, I sent this in and here's what it's going to say, but we would make no decisions based on any late information, you know?
Because I think at that point you're undermining the action, right? Because if you're allowing it, then they're going to all just kind of plug it in late,
Right.
and you're kind of defeating the purpose.
Plus,
Right,
you're-
so nothing
you're also
new-
making it much harder to defend in Article 78.
Yeah, you are.
So you want it to be in the record so that the record becomes part of the appeal. So when you can say that our board members made the decision based on these materials, so I would recommend that we want the packet to be complete, just for that reason, which happens unfortunately more frequently than we would like.
Yeah.
Yeah, so nothing new could be displayed or really discussed. They might just be able to say, we heard some of that and have updated drawings, but
Yeah.
we couldn't really discuss them.
A good example is we'll just take GE Vernova. The whole premise of this project is a building section that's going to be 19 feet higher. That building section wasn't in the packet that we received to review and was, the essential thing. Now zoning had it in their package. He didn't include it in the site work package that was here. That would have been a helpful piece of information to see. I think if the applicant found it and, we got to look at it. But again, if that information isn't in there, it's hard for us to visualize or to respond to something when all you've seen are plans and
Right.
details, not a full section to the building.
Yep.
Which is that would have been a big talking piece of what their application was. So and I agree with Mr. Hess and Chairman that I think we take the information that's there and they have deadlines, they work towards it. And the more thorough the package is, that's what we look at. If they feel that an applicant has additional information that came in afterwards, the board can always push it to the next meeting.
Yeah.
Because then it puts the onus.
Yeah, because so essentially they could come in and say, I don't even really want, they could tell clerk and we have all these updates. They really need to be in the next meeting. And then they just get pulled from the agenda and go to the next meeting with the update. Yeah.
Yep, which we're good with.
That
Yep.
sounds good.
Yeah.
And again,
Okay.
And we
then
can
that-
always get, I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's just about as clear direction as we could get. So we
Right.
just didn't understand that from the last
Yeah.
meeting.
And we can always get an update of that project if it isn't an agenda item, with their discussion period, we can say, they are updating things. This will be in the forthcoming meeting so that
Exactly.
it doesn't drop off of the radar for 3 meetings.
Yep,
or-
we can put it under reports.
Correct.
Because if we put it under discussion, the applicant might want to show up because
Yeah.
you want it to be,
Yeah.
what do you call it? Financially responsible. If we're not going to talk about it, they don't need to come either. So if they're late, again, we talked about it last time. Sooner or later, they'll get used to get it in the groove and they'll get it in on time and they'll make the adjustments if they want to get their project looked at and get it done. Right. And like the other towns, if they're holding everybody firm, they know what to expect and that's all there is to it.
We've been lenient.
Right. So we'll get there. Just
Okay.
might take some
Yeah,
time.
so we'll work on a policy. Clerk will just do some follow up with the other towns and then we can coordinate it with David and try and have something draft form for the next meeting.
Okay.
Great.
As I know before, I don't think any of this actually requires planning board approval. I think as a department head, it's up to our planner and our staff to figure out what will work for them, as long as it's going to give us the information we need on a timely basis.
Right.
That's true, but I like to have the written policies. Like we'll draft the policy based on our timeline, but I do like to have the written policies like kind of reviewed and essentially approved by the planning board, and that way everybody's all on the same page. And then if you get the call, on your private cell phone or when you're mowing, like why is this happening? You guys will know why.
Great. No, thanks, Clark, for working on that. We appreciate it.
I tend to get buttonholed in the grocery.
or if you're
Right.
walking around the co-op and somebody finds you, yeah, it happens.
Okay, also under reports, if we're okay with that we'll get an update. Work on it. It's a work in progress is the zoning code amendments for Airbnb.
Yeah,
is new.
so I actually have a couple zoning code amendments. I don't know if you guys feel like we have the bandwidth to take them on, but there's a couple places in the zoning code that the fees are hard written in there, so it makes it very inflexible for us to change fees. Linda's have a couple places in the zoning code that she would like the fees to be taken out of actually written into the code and then allowed to be changed by the town board. How most of our fees are, but there's a couple places in the zoning code that are still kind of the old way. And then I have in parentheses Airbnb regulation requests. I don't know if you guys remember, a couple months back, there was a Ruffner Road resident who was complaining about her Airbnb. We had another resident call, was very frustrated with an Airbnb on their property. I did hear from the Ruffner Road residents that actually that has become a long-term rental, but they're still concerned with it switching back over to a short-term rental. So I pulled up the old Airbnb regulation code. I still have concerns with it, but we could look at it again. I am getting phone calls.
Yeah.
I do go on Airbnb though, and there's like still only like 4 of them in all of Niskuna.
And the concern is people, not people who are renting themselves. The people, they're concerned about
The
properties
neighbors,
in
like for
the
instance,
neighborhood,
the
that's
last
what I'm
concern we got, and I thought they may come tonight. They may come to the town board. We'll see. Is they had like, it's a very large Airbnb, and they had like 13 cars parked on the road as a cul-de-sac. You know,
They took over the neighborhood.
it's actually not a code violation to have that many cars parked in the right of way. So they called the police. There's nothing the police can do. You're allowed to park the cars there, and you just can't leave
In
them
winter,
overnight in the
there is.
winter. Yeah, like you can't leave them overnight in the winter, but you can certainly have the cars there until pretty late, and that's not a code violation. So I mean, just frustrating, but you know, something to think about is even if we enact the code, it's basically just licensing them and, you know, putting some regulations on them. Like, for instance, the Lake Placid code that we had used as our model limited the number of cars allowed at an Airbnb at 6. But when you get that call, okay, so we know there's 13 cars parked in the right of way. One that's going to very likely be after hours for staff at planning board. So, I mean, it's just a thought. And it's not going to be a police enforcement ask. It's going to be building inspectors. So we're going to call the building inspectors out at like 10 o'clock at night to be counting cars in the right of way and figuring out who they belong to. I don't know. I don't know. But we could look at the code again. I have concerns with
Yeah.
like how exactly. I mean, but on the other hand, I completely understand why it's frustrating to neighbors to have like that kind of intensity of use next door to them. So it's some kind of balance.
Yeah.
Right.
And Saratoga's looking at enacting one.
Saratoga has one, but I think they're changing it.
Well, they're talking about $1,000 registration fee, and there's a lot of pushback. That's
There-
kind of high in my book.
That's an update of their registration fee. They've been
Okay.
registering Airbnbs for years,
But the other concern
but they have a lot of them.
with the Airbnb is if you're frequently renting your house out that way, at what point does your house become something other than your residence and become a commercial enterprise? And then do you lose your homestead tax break? Or, there are other issues attached to that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the
Yeah.
homestead tax part.
Well,
I can only go the zoning code way.
my guess is if you're using it for a cumulative more than 6 months a year, you probably shouldn't get your homestead break. That'd be a legal issue, but it's one that's come up in conversation with other people, so
Laura,
just toss that item in.
So
you're referencing that was the work in progress from before
Yeah.
we started and
Yeah.
kind of,
So Daisy was really heavily
Yeah.
involved in that, and we basically the one code that I can find is the one that we seem to really be considering was that it's actually the town of Elba, but that is Lake Placid somehow. I don't really understand.
the one thing that,
Where they've got a lot of units that are
Yeah.
very popular. They have great views and all that.
I think like the resident from Ruffner Road that came in front of us, the concern, at least one of the concerns, I think it's one that's hard to address, is that, the neighborhood that, you got people that are constantly, new people in the neighborhood that you don't know. And that was, I think, the concern, and your kids are out playing or, how they drive on the roads. And it's like, so there's constantly new people that you don't really become part of your neighborhood because they're there, maybe just for the weekend or for a couple of days. And that's, obviously hard to address. But if there's at least rules and regulations, at least there's some meets and, boundaries.
Yeah,
what to
I mean,
expect.
I read
Like
it
garbage,
carefully.
not
and I
out in
can put
front.
it- yeah, I can put it in your packet next time.
Yeah.
There are some guidelines, like they have to provide parking plans. They have to have, fire sensors,
Yep.
all those types of things. That type of thing, I think, is fairly easy for us to implement. What would be hard is the enforcement. Like, I still have to try and figure out exactly how that would be. And I think the planning board could recommend something to the town board, but the town board is going to have to really be like, are we going to allocate personnel to this? Because I think,
Yep.
you know, it's
That's where
going
the
to
problem.
be
Yeah.
a tough enforcement.
Yeah, especially with the volume, like you said, there's 4 listed if you took a look currently.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, maybe you enact the code and then
You know, we're sort of the
if they
home
have
of
a
it.
couple of enforcements, that's enough of that. And then they, you know, I don't know.
I've also noticed in some of the ordinances on Airbnb type rentals, they have additional restrictions where it's on a septic tank, limit the number of people. Because the capacity of the system is set and
it's usually set
overwhelming
by the,
isn't a
it's
good
usually, yeah,
idea.
it's usually set by the number of bedrooms, yeah.
The challenge is there's this, it's a frequent Airbnb, right? So there's set by how many people can sleep there.
Yeah.
Challenge is how many people visit. So you can have 5 people sleeping there overnight and you can have 50 there for a party.
So I think that was
back to enforcement.
that was one of the issues I think that
Exactly.
I recently got the phone calls about is that it was essentially I don't think those cars were there overnight, but there was a significant
Speak from
party
experience
of
on the
people
party
there
or the
unknown to the neighborhood.
But you know, people
I
rent
know.
them like for holidays
Oh,
and stuff,
definitely.
and then they host the
Yeah, so I
holiday.
think, so I think it might be good to review
To open it up again.
the proposed code we were thinking about from Elba.
Yeah. So I can bring that back, and then if you guys don't care, because when we look at the zoning code amendments, if we're opening it up because it's a seeker process and all of that, we would fix some of the fees and things. like
Yeah,
that.
so I do have a question on that. So what's the thought of mechanically how you would actually then
So-
state those fees for someone reading the code?
Yeah, so normally in our code, I don't know if I can find an example quickly, but normally in our code, it just says the fees will be set by the town board. And then the town board can amend them from time to time just with a resolution. But occasionally in our code, it'll literally say the fee is $50.
No, no, yeah, so
That's the,
Yeah.
so let me tell. So where I'm coming from is I think that at any point in time, anyone interacting with our code should be able to see for that day, month, year, 10-year period what a fee is. So my comment was mechanically how we're going to do it. So maybe we can have a section where the fees are all listed and have the text in the code reference that section, knowing fully well that that section by town board action can get updated periodically. I think not clearly communicating a fee in terms of a dollar figure or number to a reader of the code is a little troublesome.
Yeah. The only problem with that is as soon as you put a fee, even if it can be updated in a document, then that document's got to be revised. If the planning department or building department just maintained a list of the current fees on file, so when an applicant comes in, you just hand them the current fees. That seemed like that'd be a lot easier to update, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we can discuss it. Something that makes it readily accessible to a person who is interacting with the code.
Yeah, because I think what's frustrating to Linda is that some of these fees haven't been updated in like 25 or 30 years. In part because I mean you literally have to go through seeker in order to review the fees if they're in the zoning code. There is a section of code in our chapter that's entitled fees, and it does have planning and zoning fees. But it's something that we'd have to look at. Normally, I think when the town board adopts a resolution, it's not expected that the town board residents would have to go and find that resolution to be adopted. Normally we make charts and we put them on the forums and we explain it to people when they come in. Yeah.
They can post all the fees on.
Because nobody
online.
can find the resolutions for the fees.
Laura, I have a question. So I'm going to Airbnb my home, but I'm not telling anybody. So who polices that?
I mean, so we don't regulate the time frame for rentals in the town of Niskayuna. There's no differentiation to us between a rental for one night and 10 years. And it's certainly not a problem for you to rent your house to a long-term renter for 10 years. We have lots of people in Niskayuna that are renting a full single-family home. You can rent a full single-family home in Niskayuna. What you cannot do is rent a room. So if you're living in your house and you just want to make a little extra money and you go on Airbnb and say, I'm just going to rent a room, that's not allowed.
But who discovers that if I'm not going to disclose that? If I'm not going to be
it's
legit?
typically it's typically done by complaint. So our office is
Okay.
driven by complaint. Like
Okay.
we don't go around looking for complaints. There's enough of them out there.
I'm
Because
sure.
this is forever.
Okay.
We're complaint driven. So if
Okay.
somebody sends that to us, then a building inspector would go out there, with whatever evidence he has and just be like, you can't rent a room. That's not allowed under our single family zoning. But you can rent a whole house.
Under Airbnb?
Yeah, in Niskuna, yeah.
Okay.
But it has to be the whole
Yeah,
house.
or
'cause
VRBO,
theoretically-
Airbnb, just short-term rental, right?
It can be, yeah, there's a bunch of
There's
them.
other
Yeah, it
other
has
ones.
to be short.
You
I
keep
mean,
saying Airbnb, but
because you're
But if you
only
keep,
because there's no time frame for us. Like a rental is a rental. So as long as it's a whole house that's being rented theoretically to another single family, and I'm telling you, we are never going to go in there and be like, show us how you're related. Like that is just not going to happen.
right, but if you're saying we're going to look at a schedule of fees or something of the like, how do you enforce those? If someone's not complaining and there may be an Airbnb going on next door to me, that's perfectly fine. They're not bothering me.
Mhm.
So who?
It's
Kind of like
complaint
the dog
it's
license
complaint
thing.
It's really, I mean, theoretically, and this is something that we talked about when we were thinking about enacting it before. I mean, they don't really have the time to do this, but theoretically they could go on to Airbnb and just see who's listed for a day. I mean, but typically it would be complaint driven. So if somebody is, kind of suffering an adverse effect from an Airbnb, and then they call us and we look at our list of registered Airbnbs and they're not on the list,
Okay.
then the building
Right.
inspector goes out and says, hey, why aren't you registered? You're causing problems for your neighborhood, and here's all our paperwork, and you better get your butt in gear.
Okay.
Or,
Got
you're gonna see a lot more of our grubby faces. So
And it works that way with the home occupation users too.
yeah, it does.
That's a good example.
great. Anything else right now on that? So you take what we've got, Laura, or are you going to update it with that other town and get that back out again?
The only one I could actually find that it seems we had reasonable discussion on was the town of Elba. Yeah. I think the other ones we looked at we didn't like.
There was a different one I encountered in some of the training, but I can't remember where it was. And my notes are in a very sad state. I'm sorry. So I won't here check and find it.
All right. All right. If there's nothing else on that, just commission business, anybody have any questions or comments for the planning department or legal, anything? Any updates on the Miller brothers on the court actions we have?
No, I don't have any updates on that. Clark and I had a meeting with the JCC, and we do expect a site plan for them at our next meeting.
Oh, what are they doing
They
now?
want to add a yurt.
A yurt?
A yurt.
Oh my God, are they still in fashion?
I guess so.
They're gonna rent it. They're gonna Airbnb it.
No.
Actually.
For their camp.
Yeah, yurts are
That
actually
makes sense,
yurts are quite a
actually.
bit in fashion.
They are.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying. You can make some.
Well, they were
Especially further
a big
down
thing when I was young, and I haven't heard much about them since.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that should probably be on our next town meeting.
All right.
Something to look forward to. A yurt.
Any other questions or comments from anybody? No? All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn by Ms. Gold. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Zalowski. I'll get that sooner or later. Sorry. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Really?
Everyone.